Anil, thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much, and welcome to the session. I'll keep sipping my little tea here just so that my throat doesn't get dry.
Sure. That's great.
Right,
Please get coffee, water bottle, whatever in hand.
Yeah,
So
fine,
it's going
sure.
to be an interesting session here.
Yeah, so the reason why I thought it will be good to address you all is for the following reason, that I teach this subject or related subjects. One, of course, at our IIT. Two, I've started off with teaching Introduction to Programming at BSc IIT Madras BSc program in Data Sciences. And third initiative that I've taken is, of course, the NPTEL lecture videos where I have taught social networks, which is applied data sciences. Quite some machine learning ideas we apply over there and make sense of the society around us. It has been an interesting subject for me, but machine learning comes as a sort of a byproduct of this topic. And the fourth initiative is I'm part of this Plaksha University. I'm a visiting faculty over there where we teach a master's degree program for, I wouldn't call them students because the age group ranges from 25 to 40, quite seniors in a way. And they start off with programming, go up to data sciences, and even beyond that. People from economics background come there, and wide variety of people. And that is one experience. And I wanted to see an experience from a place like GUI, which has pioneered, I must say. I'm very happy to say that it is one of its kind in India, trying to do something that the ministry has come out recently. Of course, they have been envisioning it from a long time, but GUI has realized that the way to reach a student's heart is through the local language. And they've done it really well. I'm personally a fan, and that is one reason why I thought I will come and be more of a student in this session and give you my sort of a glimpse of a view of what is data sciences with a learner's perspective, at the same time also teacher's perspective. So if I would like to start briefly, I would like to start with a question. So Ms. Lahiri and Bala, is it okay if I keep the session interactive? Some of them can unmute and talk, right? Or is it, it's not possible? They can only chat, I believe, right?
Sure. Yeah, they can. I mean, most of them who are interested in questions, we will address it at the end. Okay. But yeah, you can keep it interactive.
All right. So I have a first question for everyone. I'm sure all of you are from CSE background, or at least a background. By CSE, I don't mean CS in BTech. You have studied computer science at the level of, let's say, a first course in programming. Somewhere you have tried programming, you understand what is let's say, a for loop, a variable declaration. You have heard of languages like C, C++, Python, right? Is there anyone here who has not undergone a course in programming? In fact, at our IITs, we get people who have not even touched a keyboard because they're so focused about JEE exams that they finish it with flying colors and come and say, boom, we haven't touched the keyboard. If you had touched the keyboard, you'll be distracted enough to not clear JEE, right? So don't mind at all. Please let me know in case there are some people here who are not introduced to programming at all. So I will tone down my discussion. Or if there is nobody here with that kind of a background, I'll assume without losing out on anyone here, this sample space comprises of people who have written some code, something beyond hello world. All right. Okay. So with that in mind, I would like to pose a small question. Let me start with a simple question like sorting. Okay. This is not data science, they say, but in my opinion, there's a good deal of data science that goes behind simple sorting. All right. Anyways, before I go further, I would like to tell you my definition of data science, ML, AI, and soft computing, intelligent systems, and whatnot. It is all like Shivaji Rao Gaikwad, renamed as Rajinikanth, right? Rajinikanth realized that the only way to become sort of popular, not just Rajini, even Amitabh Bachchan, none of these names are real names. They change it for two reasons. One reason is that it is sort of flashy, it is punchy. Second reason is that people who know them already should not recognize them. All right, they want new fans. So similarly, the history, if you see, people started calling it AI from the electrical background, and computer science people realized this has a very strong social network, very strong algorithmic component. I saw the chat window, someone said social science and it popped out. It has a very strong algorithms component, and they said, let us take an algorithmic approach to the subject called artificial intelligence. And they were super successful in the 90s. And they called it, to be unique, to be different, let's call it machine learning. This is my guess of what has happened, because when I look at courses that call themselves AI, ML, and data sciences, there is some intersection. In fact, a given topic is sometimes taught as subject A, subject B, or subject C. So it is just old wine in the new bottle, more or less. It is the sorting technique that I'm going to tell you people. The thread starts from there. We'll be discussing mainly three things today. One is the sorting technique, and I'll take on it a good introduction to data sciences. Second thing is a question on your physics, chemistry, maths marks. Let's say if I give 1 million students marks, what can we make sense out of this marks? Okay, something that's very obvious to our minds, because we are trained to see what kind of marks means what kind of seat, what kind of future, and things like that. And third is, I would like to teach you people something about gambling, because gambling is a very interesting way to think about data sciences, at least how I see it. All right, first question, sorting. There was once upon a time, computers were very, very big, so big that it was as big as, let's say, a small department. Okay, they would call it, it's called valve electronics. Very, very big computers. They didn't have electronic circuits back then. And people realized that this is a way to compute, and hardware is important. All right. So they said, let me switch my view. They said hardware is important. Is it visible, all of you? Sometimes it mirror reflects whatever I'm writing. Is it clear?
Yes, I can see that.
So I wrote.
Guys, can you just respond in the chat so that
it's not asymmetric, right? Okay, fine, very good, very good.
This looks fine. Yeah.
Sudarshan, you're on mute actually.
Oh, okay. So am I audible now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I wonder how that happened. All right. So I think we muted all, and I also got muted. No problem. So they said that it's the hardware, more the merrier. Okay. Better the hardware, better can be the computation. And from valve electronics, they came to integrated circuits, and there was this VLSI leap. All technical jargons, don't worry, they improved, like your car. Okay, from the ancient noisy four-wheelers to the super cool BMWs today, it has been a revolution. Similarly, there was revolution in hardware. They realized that more the merrier. But then later on, people parallelly started working in their 80s on what is called, of course, let me read it, software in general, but it is actually a very algorithmic approach to computing. They said it is not about the body, it's also about the mind. Sound mind in the sound body, they say, right? So it's not about muscles and a big person. It's also about how he uses them. Now, what techniques he has in his mind. Correct? You see a martial artist being very thin and sort of not very tall, but then he can make the moves and knock a buffalo off the ground, right? So they said it's also software, and they sealed on it. With time, they also saw that 90s and the early 2000s. CPU became smaller and smaller. They could do more and more computation, but with time they realized that the heating up problem started, and they stopped. You see, there is no big revolution after, let's say, 2 or 3 gigahertz of processing ability. If you try to fit in more processor there, it gets heated up. You should devise new ways of parallelizing your ideas, and that's the bottleneck. Okay. Very recently, they realized, oh my God, it's not just about hardware and software. There is a third bubble here. Okay. And this was non-trivial. Okay. And the third bubble realization came from a very simple question like sorting. If you look at how you sort, let's say a few numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 million numbers. If I see how to sort them, okay, there are so many ways. All right. A good software will help you. A good hardware definitely will help you. Okay. And then they came out with this idea of cloud, where you need not have the hardware and software. You just send the information via internet or some network. It will compute there. You have very hi-fi machines at the end of IBM or Amazon Web Services, and it will get back to you with an answer, right? But they realized beyond all these things, there is something else. When you want to sort the data, given sorting is a very trivial exercise that is given to everyone, right? First non-trivial program that you write is that of sorting. People observed a small catch here. The catch was, if the numbers are already sorted, why do you have to sort? You don't have to sort, correct? But that's stupidity. How can we expect numbers to be sorted all the time? They said, what if it's in descending order? Then simply reverse it. It is sorted in ascending order. Okay. Sounds like folly. Sounds like a stupid way of seeing it. Numbers can come in any order. But then they said, in real world, numbers don't come in a random order. They come in a particular pattern. If you understand that pattern with very minimal hardware and software resources, probably you can sort it better. All right. So this is like saying, if I know what ailment a person has, I can ask him to undergo a particular health checkup and then give him the particular medication, right? Or if he doesn't know what he is suffering from and I don't know how to diagnose it, I'll ask him to undergo 1,000 tests. All right. The idea is I can make some money too there, but the point is you will be torturing him with a lot of complexity. Knowing something about the data generally helps. And they realized that it not just generally helps, it was a triangle that got closed. They said that to do good computing, hardware is as important as software. And beyond these two things, we never realized data is even more important. So important that if you understand data better, you can do well with ordinary hardware and ordinary software. So that's what happens in your mobile. People know what kind of words you use, what kind of pictures you share, and they know how to compress those kind of pictures only. They will not compress random pictures. A picture containing just a portrait, sort of face. There's a particular algorithm that they will implement on that. A beautiful scenic view through your window. Very frequently posted pictures. There's a particular algorithm. So they realize that it's about the data too, not just about hardware, software. So let's try different strokes to different folks. And that data drove algorithms. Data drove the way we do computation today. Okay. How data is tells us what is what. Let me give you a small illustration. Okay, so there are some questions about in general dynamics. So that will probably be handled at the end of the session by Bala and Lahari.
Yes,
right?
Definitely. Guys, please wait. Let Sudarshan proceed with the session and we'll discuss about any doubts at the end of the session.
Also, a small request in general is to be very excited about this subject. In fact, it is very exciting. You will feel like you're a kid in the candy store as you go ahead. In fact, you'll get a lot of data sets to crunch. Every time you crunch, you see something new over there. One small data set, you can ask 1,000 questions, no exaggeration. And these 1,000 questions will open up 1,000 more questions. The numbers are right. In fact, you always can ask questions in the order of thousands. Okay, so this triangle got closed and you can ask me, I don't sort of understand. Why are you giving me? You think as a data science expert, I'll only be crunching numbers, sorting numbers and stuff like that. Who cares whether you can sort quickly or not? If you cannot sort quickly, take a little more time. There's a quick saying in Hindi, right? They say, "Aram se karo bhai, jaldi kya hai?" No, what's the hurry? Do it aram se. You can always say 1 second, ya 2 second, ya 3 second, ya 5 second le lo bhai. Do it at your own pace, right? Okay, so I'll give you a small example. There is this recent work, very interesting work, called speech to face. Let me just write that down. Speech to face. First point that we'll discuss, Second point is entering a TV show room. These two are related. I'll go slowly. Okay. So what is this speech to face? What is this entering a TV showroom? I'll start with the second one. All right. So I enter a TV showroom. Okay. And there is a manager who sits there. All right. I'm talking about the importance of data sciences, how it will rule the way we talk, we behave, we shop, and whatnot. Right. Very, very straightforward approach, actually. You all will understand this. If there is one take-home message, probably it is these 2 points. You enter the TV showroom, and the manager stands there and then watches the customer. Based on who is the customer, he'll send the right marketing executive. If he sends the best marketing executive for a person who has just come to see television and listen to his favorite song in the big screen, he'll be wasting the time of the marketing executive. Okay. So they used to do this actually in big TV showrooms. They would they would have some way of communicating. They'll say, "Hey Ravi, yahan pe aa jao, see the customer," or "Kritika, yahan pe aa jao, see the customer." They would assign the right marketing executive to the right customer based on what kind of televisions they would want. By looking at the way the person has dressed, what kind of mobile handset he is using, his footwear and his facial expressions, the sentiments that he carries, you can sort of predict what television he will buy. This sounds unbelievable. This is like horoscope. Look at your hand and then predict what's going to happen in your future. It's exactly that actually. You look at a customer enter, look at him from top to bottom. To a good extent, you can say what television he will buy, what range of television he'll be interested in. He will come in to buy a television in the range, in the budget of 50,000. You can convince him to buy a television over the budget of 70,000. Even that a person can gauge. This very person today is a computer. All right. So I plug in a couple of cameras. This is indeed realized. In fact, what I am going to tell in speech to face is very similar to this. You can Google for this, the first one. They look at a person's face, person's footwear, person's mobile phones, whatever mobile phone handset he is using, and his overall stature, his facial sentiments that he shows on the face, also called the sentiment analysis. They do it mainly at the level of word and also at the level of face. And they will understand what range of television we can sell to this person. Now, how can this be true? How can one devise such an algorithm? The algorithm is very simple. They will say, a person wearing this kind of shoes, having this kind of a mobile, having this kind of a face cut, having this kind of a hairstyle, having this kind of a, in this age group, which by the way, you can find out today just by taking a picture, right? With all these things, the computer will have the final column there. The column one is what? His, let's say, height, weight, etc., which you can judge based on the picture. His shoes, mobile, etc. Several 10 variables. And the last variable will be, did he buy the television or not? What was the price that he paid for the television? What model did he buy? Assume you had 1 million such data points. It will be a cakewalk for you to predict whether a new customer will at all buy the television or he will not buy the television. If he buys the television, what model of television he'll be interested in, so on and so forth. Here are two things that you must observe. One is, this idea works like a charm. Okay, it works like a charm. If you more the data, merrier, right? Lesser data, you cannot, commonsensically speaking, if you have only 2 data points, you cannot say what is what. If you have 1 million customers who have entered your showroom, and if you know what they have bought, then you can map all these things. Okay. Now they used a very similar technique in this speech to face. What they did was, imagine I switch off my video. I'm switching off on purpose. Okay. And I'm talking now, and someone just joined. They don't know who is Sudarshan Iyengar, right? And they try to predict how I look like, right? Commonsensically speaking, is this possible? If someone talks to you on phone, can you guess how the person might look like? Of course, you haven't seen the person before. Can you guess how the person looks like just by his speech? Sounds impossible, right? But do you have a knack that you know his age, gender, you know for sure? one information is very easy. More or less, you can say whether it's a boy or a girl. If the person is very young, it's difficult to say. Some, there will be sort of some bias there. It's tough to, but teenager plus, it is sort of with a very high accuracy, you can say whether it's a male or female. Age also can be predicted. And definitely, I'm a South Indian. If not for my name, at least my accent speaks out in itself. I have a strong and whatnot. I mean, when I record my own videos and then watch them, I know for sure, nobody can ask me a proof that I'm a South Indian. My voice itself speaks. Anyways, these are two parameters that you can make out as a human being. If you take the voice of many people and map it to their facial structures, how do you do this? These people, the speech-to-face research, what they did was, they took a lot of YouTube videos, tons and tons of YouTube videos, millions and millions of hours of YouTube videos, and they took the face which was talking, okay, mapped this kind of voice with this kind of face. When they got million hours of video, which by the way is there on YouTube, every minute they say 100 hours of videos are being uploaded, or maybe even more today. I don't know. This is some 2-year-old news. With that much of data, you can easily map. This person is from this region. This person is of this age group. This person is a male. This person is from this age group and sounds very healthy. He should look like this age group so much. And you can actually predict the eye structure, nose structure, the mouth, the face, the ears. And they have predicted the looks of Bollywood actors just by listening to their voice on YouTube. Just take a look at this research called speech to face. You will be stunned. The point is, it's not about this research alone. It's about how is it done. If you see how is it done, whole of the subject is more or less what is called curve fitting. You see, a grandmother's way of judging who is right, who is wrong. My grandmother would look at my friends and say, hey, don't mingle with this person. He's very, he looks very naughty. He looks very dangerous. He looks like a thief. And I would confront my grandmother. I would say, how can you look at the face of a person and then blah, 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 blah. But then my grandmother has seen a person with this kind of a behavior, this kind of a face, this kind of a word usage is trustworthy. This kind of a person is not trustworthy. Okay. So on and so forth, right? So you sort of make out how what people are just by looking at their features. This may be true, may not be true, but when you map, you will realize that most of the times it can be true if you have a lot of data. Okay, so with this data science modern data science rather was born. All these things were sort of known statistically speaking. I mean, people who are into statistics and all, they find all these ideas trivial. The idea of correlations and non-parameterized statistics, and there are some jargons they use, but the idea simply is curve fitting in different ways. Okay. And people thought, now that we have a lot of data, simple talking, we talking and you people logging in, logging out, and all that put together, create some sort of a data set, right? And that data set itself will be in the order of a few GBs. Okay. If you take, for instance, a typical classroom that happens today online, one teacher's class for the entire semester generates a few terabytes of data. Analyze all those things, you can definitely make sense out of it. Okay, so with this, I will move on to the next question, which is rather a puzzle. So I'm going to ask you to bet today. Okay, so will it rain? There's a very popular example to teach students on the first day of the course. Will it not rain?
Guys, you can unmute and answer.
Okay. So at my place today, the weather prediction says, I have a question. Yeah, I'll pose the question. Not raining probability is 0.7. Raining probability is 0.3. Okay. My question is, can you people bet? I'm asking you to bet with me 1,000 rupees. All right. That will it rain today or will it not rain today? What will you bet? Weather prediction says raining probability is 0.3. Not raining possible. Let's not use the word probability. It's the first class. Let's say possibility. Raining possibility is 0.3. Not raining possibility is 0.7. What will you bet on? If you win, you will get twice the money. If you invest 1,000 rupees, and if you say if you bet this side, it will not rain, and you win, you will be getting 2,000. Meaning 1,000 will become 2,000. Okay. Otherwise, you will be losing. In case it rains, you will be losing. So what will you all bet mostly? All of you are saying not rain, not rain, not rain.
Rain.
Hi, Sudarshan. It's Navin over here. I would like to know the better data about this. If we are talking about whether it is going to rain on today, so I would like to see the weather and this in the sky, whether it is cloudy or it is a clear or it is a sunny day or whatever it is.
Okay, so this is please understand, this is a sort of a fictitious question with only a few things assumed and a lot of things not known. I'm telling you about my place. In this place, I have consulted weather experts, and they are trustworthy. Okay, and whatever they have been predicting is coming out to be true so far. Okay, and they have said the probability of raining is 0.3 and the probability of it not raining is 0.7. Okay, we are going to trust this data. This is like a coin. A coin will come 0.3 times head, 0.7 times it will come as tail. Now, what will you bet on? Will you say it will turn out to be head or turn out to be tail?
So it would be better if we trust the experts, whoever it is.
Go by the experts. And what will you bet on? Will you bet on it will not rain or will it rain? You have 1,000.
Not rain.
Not rain.
Not rain. So what I will do is this 1,000, you can imagine it as some 1 million or something to make it more interesting. But what I will do is there's a possibility for me.
Bet on both, sir.
Yeah. Put 500 this side and 500 this side. That possibility is also there. So isn't it wise to say, if it doesn't rain, I'll put 500 rupees for doesn't rain and 500 rupees for it rains. This is like you go to a horse race or a lottery ticket, okay, and you divide your money equally to some 2 horses or 2 numbers. Makes sense, no? I mean, more. If you put your eggs into many baskets, probably the probability of you losing them will be less. Commonsensical. How many of you think that option 1 is simply all 1,000 invested here and nothing invested here? This is option 1. Option 2 is 500 invested here, 500 invested here. Option 3 is just a minute. Option 3 is, let's say, some other color, something else. Which option will you choose? A, B, or a custom your own option? All right. The answer is not important. What is important is for you to realize that A may not be a good choice.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Your board is not visible. It's not.
The board is not visible. I'm so sorry.
Yep.
Good that you told me. Okay. So do you see A is 0, possibility A is 0 and 1,000. Possibility B is 500, 500. Possibility C is custom tailored. You can choose whatever you want. What will you choose? I have a feeling A may not be the right thing to do. You should not invest everything in only one place. Even if it's bank, even if it's share market, you don't invest in only one share. You don't buy only one type of stocks, right? Division of 500, 500 is okay. But then if rain was a lot lesser than not rain, then you would not like to spend 500, 500 there. Okay. Okay. Someone is saying something less. Okay. Let's make a note of it. Maybe 200 and 800. Okay. My question is, what is the ideal distribution which will maximize your chances? See, if you have bad luck, you will lose. Okay. There's every possibility you will lose. There's a possibility that you will lose. There's a possibility that you will make money. Okay. The idea here is to maximize it. There's a very good biological example which I would like to give here. You see, calcium is very good for your bones. Generally, a man dies out of heart attack as he or she grows older, or she or he dies out of fall when the bone density becomes very less, or multiple organ disorder, etc., etc. Generally, if the person is walking around and fit and the heart is healthy, longevity is guaranteed. But then you must understand that for your bone, you need calcium, and calcium is bad for the heart. More the calcium, heart is, going less and less healthy, losing health, and your bone is gaining more and more health. No calcium, reduce it, bone becomes very weak, but heart stays very strong. You cannot have the best of both worlds. And that's the reason the theory of evolution says a man dies eventually, because this trade-off, this fight of it. I just gave you a simple example of calcium. Anything that you intake, including fat and protein or whatever, has some side effects in your body, not just tablets and medicines, even food has side effects. So there is something called optimization that you must do. Here is a very good question of optimization, right? The reason why I'm telling you these things is appearingly, commonsensically, A and B are not necessarily the right options. Commonsensically, some right, actually the correct answer is 300, 700. All right, someone even gave me that answer. Very good. So how do you get that is a question. I don't know at least how you narrowed it down to 300, 700. Can we data scientifically analyze this and see a simple simulation of a biased coin? I hope I'm not talking a lot of technical terms. A very simple Python code in 2 minutes will tell you, you can run this experiment 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times and see a particular distribution maximizes your return. Just like a particular quantity of calcium taken every day will give you strong bones, enough that it is strong, at the same time doesn't affect your heart. The just right balance, right? You should neither do a lot of exercising, nor should you not exercise. There's a right amount of exercising that you must do, right? What is that? The question of optimization, I would say, is more than 70% of the subject. We have to know what is an optimum point. Okay, so this is a good example. One of you can take a look at how you can programmatically check what is the right distribution here between rain and not rain. Let me switch to iPad view. Or you can mathematically, you can say, well, I can use a computer, or I can do analysis. I'll take my pen and paper and try to figure out what could be the right distribution. It may take a long time. You may even fail forever, but yeah, with some struggle, you may even succeed. Try doing this and get back to me in case you have more questions. I'm not going to get into the depths of it, but I just said that most of these things starts with a motivational question like this. Okay, the idea of probability in data science, I would say the first good impression is this problem, which will tell you how much to bet on. Okay, let's go to the third question now. All right, so I have this physics, chemistry, and mathematics marks of roughly 1 million people. Okay, so let me just open that data set. I have the data set here. Just a minute. Just give me a second. This is pretty interesting. I would say just with this example, you can teach more than 3/4 of data sciences. We'll be revisiting this question in my own course. I revisit this question quite often just to see if we can explain everything using just this. Okay, just give me a sec. I'm there in no time. I'll share my screen in a moment. The idea is simple. You have 1 million entries of physics, chemistry, and mathematics. All right, just a moment. So Lahiri, I'll just take 1 minute.
Sure, Sudarshan, please.
Okay.
Guys, be ready to stay focused because it's an important concept, it seems. This concept will be recurring every time later. So
I mean, pedagogically speaking, one can in fact teach good amount of the subject using just this example. And I would say if you understand this, you understand most of the topics, in my humble opinion. Okay.
All right.
019663110196663. Just logging into my Google account. I had kept everything ready yet. Okay. Okay, it's done.
Yeah.
I'm basically going to show you all a small Excel sheet, which is okay. You can see the
We can't see the sheet.
now.
Yeah, right now. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So this is the participants data set that I collected recently. Don't worry much about what and where of it. Just understand that there are 100 people here and have collected their physics, chemistry, maths marks. Okay. As you can see, first being, I think, my own marks. Anyway, this is not the marks I secured, but anyways, it's an example. Okay. Physics, chemistry, and math marks. And what we observed was, this predicted math marks was physics, so 60% of physics if you take, 40% of chemistry if you take, that was the math marks. Okay, we predicted that this is sort of very close. So what am I trying to say? Let me just switch the mode and then tell you, and then get back to this sheet in a second. Okay, so all I'm trying to say is we have 100 entries here, 100 entries here, and 100 entries here. Assume math mark is more or less the average of physics and chemistry almost always. By almost always, I mean most of the times it comes very close to the average of physics and chemistry. Okay, then you need not store this math marks, right? What's the need to store the math marks? Because you will get this beautiful formula which says your math marks is simply the average of physics and chemistry. I hope that I'm not threatening you with numbers and equations here. Pretty straightforward. Take half of physics and half of chemistry, you get mathematics. If that's the case, then why store this? Why store this very column? You don't have to store this very column, right? So the predicted math using that formula, whatever, is so much. The error between this and this is very small. So you can estimate this by using this and this. You can avoid this entire. Okay, just a minute. Make a copy. I'll just show you in a new screen just so that I can delete around and then change the data as well. So what is the need for this column? If this column is always the sort of the average of this and this, I can simply remove it. Boom, it's gone. But can I get it back? Yeah, you can get it back because this is the average of this and this. Correct? So many a times the data that is given to you, the so-called big data, will have these redundant entries. Okay, one entry will depend on the sort of other two entries. Okay, then what you do is you ensure that you retain the important entries and then give up on the unimportant entries. Okay, they call this dimensionality reduction. Very straightforward idea. It's a technical term to say, for instance, I take your age, I take your height. Can I predict your weight? Okay, I go to a school, let's say, a school, and in a school, there's some sort of homogeneous data. In a classroom, very well, a 13-year-old, his height and weight are somewhat, related. You tell me the height, I can tell you the weight. Okay, age is also important. Age, height, weight. One part depends on the other two. So when you have 10 such dimensions, dimension simply means 10 such columns, not all of them will be required. Only a few of them will be required. Okay. Application one, here in this very column, you see there are 2 bytes here, 2 bytes here, 2 bytes here, totally 6 bytes, basically 6 letters. Okay. And there are 100 entries here. correct? 100 entries. So you have 600 entries here. But I am saying that you can get rid of this simply because you know that it is some physics times some chemistry. You have reduced 1/3 the data. Okay, you saw compression happening here. Number one. Now, in fact, what I'm explaining to you people is roughly 1 or 2 2-hour sessions, but I'm trying to condense that into a smaller session. I hope I'm making sense. First is compression. You compressed it by 1/3. Second is, if someone's entry is missing for some reason, this is what is happening today in the COVID crisis. You see, I mean, we are unable to give them exams. So we are predicting what could have been their marks if they had given by looking at their previous marks, right? So if just one entry is missing, it is very easy to extrapolate the entries based on the other entries. Pretty straightforward, right? This very idea is used in image analysis too. Okay, where I think I'm sorry, I forgot to switch.
Sudarshan, report.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm very sorry. So
That's
please let me know when I do that, because I have different modes. If I remove one person's marks here, I repeat, you can check the other marks and try to figure out what can this marks be intuitively, because you know you have found a relationship between physics, chemistry marks and the mathematics marks. This may not always be true. This will actually not always be true, but mostly it will be a very good estimate. In our case, especially, it is turning out to be a beautiful estimate where the error is very, very small. If it is 60, its actual answer is actually 63. Okay, if it's 56, actual is only 58. A very small error here. 1.62 is perfectly fine, right? So first application is you can, if you don't have this, you compress the data by 1/3. Right? You can get that data whenever you want because it's a simple formula based on the first column and second column, right? Second application is if there is some missing data, okay, noise in the data, you can get it back, okay? And the best part, the part that fascinated me as a student long back, some 15 years ago, is 12 years ago, let's say, was the recommending system based on this data. If someone gets, let's say, let me go to the last column. Let me put your name here. Okay. Your name here, pretty motivational. If you get it right, your name. Okay. You get some marks here. Let's say 81 and let's say 92. This can be predicted by using the previous data. Okay. With all this data, it is easy to predict this. So I repeat. First thing is compression. Second thing is recommendation. Third thing is you can even remove noise. But understand the catch here. The catch here is you need a lot of data points. And today you have those data points. And you know where you have these data points? Especially in a populous country like India, we generate humongous data. We generate so much data that, you know, in India alone, if you look at the railways data generated, I think that is as much data as any other countries, any other data set, all of them put together. Indian railways generate so much of data. Okay. Of course, they collect it too, but not so much that we can do analytics and make sense of it. Okay. I'll give a couple of examples maybe, and then let's switch to question and answer sessions. I'll even see some questions here and then answer. Very interesting application. In fact, you look at Amazon, your friend, neighboring shopkeeper who's a friend to you, the moment he gives you a product, he says, this is sold, no returns, please. He says that, correct? But the Amazon person, I mean, he's very happy to take away and then replace it with no questions asked. Replacement is guaranteed. If you don't like the product, you can return it back. I mean, what happens here? How exactly are they able to do it? They've observed that genuine customers, by looking at how they buy, their buying pattern, they observe that returns are very, very less. For instance, we all buy a lot of Amazon, Flipkart products. How many do we return? Maybe less than 0.1% of the times we return, or 1% of the times, still that is manageable. They have done probably huge data. I don't know how Amazon works, but I'm just saying that the possibility of you coming out with such a strategy, you know, it can be scandalous because someone can simply keep returning the products. chalo, get 2 shirts, wear it for the party and then return it back. Okay. Amazon will probably have a threshold. It knows that when this person is returning, it seems to be in the average behavior pattern. If it goes beyond that, they'll probably call you, talk to you, and tell you that returns are by more than purchasing. This is not allowed, right? And go to a McDonald's or Pizza Hut or wherever, okay? Buy a glass of Pepsi, okay? And knock it down. Don't try it. I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, if you do this, you know what will happen immediately? Can someone guess and tell me the answer in the chat window? You go to McDonald's and then knock off a Pepsi can. Guess what happens? A person from far away will immediately come running. He'll not scold you. Your mom will scold you, your dad will scold you. If I am around, I will scold you for knocking the can, but they will not scold you. They'll immediately give you a replacement saying, sir, it's perfectly okay, happens. We have seen many such instances. Don't worry at all, we'll refill it at no extra cost. Okay, why do they do that? They do that because in a day, 1 or 2 such things happen. When 1 or 2 such things happen, their loss is some few bucks, 50, 60 rupees, that's all. But they win the heart of the customer. All right, this customer say, wow, McDonald's, they replace a knocked out can. But if you go there and say, come, I want 1 Pepsi, and the moment it comes, you knock it down, and the next one you knock it down, they probably will not like it. So data scientifically speaking, they have observed that very less amount of juice falls happen, so they can replace it, and that way they'll even win the heart of the customer. This is all data scientific. They have observed that it's a very, very small noise, small plus or minus in their accounts, and they can afford it. Okay, so it is important for us to analyze our data. Something as simple as you wear a smartwatch, the amount of data it gives you about your sleep, about your heart rate, and these days you even have oxygen meters built into your watches. It can be very, very eye-opening. A simple Python script, I'm sure by the end of 1 or 2 months itself of any course, I'm sure GUI does a much better job at this. I personally know it. I have seen the syllabus. You will be able to buy a smartwatch, a cheapest one in the market, and then get the data out of it. Almost all watches from Apple to Samsung to you name it, Garmin or Fitbit, they allow you to take the data. Take the data and you can write simple code to analyze your sleep patterns, and are you improving with time, or are you getting into stress? How is your heartbeat patterns? And all that can be beautifully analyzed with just your handheld data. Okay, you don't have to go to a doctor, in fact, to do this preliminary analysis. You can tie one to your mother's wrist and then try to analyze it and tell her beyond what a doctor can. Doctor also look at correlations. They also do data sciences only. They look at your heartbeat. They press around your tummy and see if there's any enlargement of anything. Right, look into your eyes, tongue, and look at correlations. But here you will get longitudinal data, which means across different time steps. With all these examples, all I'm trying to say is data, when given in large numbers, is very eye-opening. Data about you when it's given in large numbers is very eye-opening. More eye-opening a thing is data when given to you about me and million others is not just eye-opening, it is third eye-opening. You can get glimpses of what's going to happen to this person in the future. And why are we talking about this? Why is data science even important? See, we all talk about placements, money, job. You ask a random person, my own institute, I keep asking this. I enjoy talking to students, very sweet chaps, especially, they would have come from far away India and residential campus, and they like socializing once in a while with the professors at least. So when we start talking, I ask them, why are you here? What are you doing? Immediate answer will be, I want to make a lot of money. I want to be successful. I want to do well in my life. And sort of morally right, speaking morally acceptable a statement would be, I mean, see, not many people talk about they want to give back to the society. That's also part of it. See, money making is very important. I want to make a lot of money too. But at the end of the day, I want to see my placeholder in my life. My mother doesn't gauge me based on how much money I make. She sees me how good a person I am. I'm talking data science. I'm not giving you moral lessons. Please don't mistake me. I'm coming there. Okay. What is the impact that we can make tomorrow to, let's say, our place, our state, our country, or the world, or mankind in general, or to our very being in being sort of super general here? The answer to this is it's only obvious if you see that data science, when it's properly used, there's a lot of sitcom serial series on this topic. I'm sure many of you know of it already, can create a better world. Trust me, what's happening today in Afghanistan, didn't mean to take sides here, but then most of it probably can be avoided if we had some good deal of sensors, good deal of cameras, all the data collected over the cloud. You can always say they can come and destroy the cameras, but at any level, no security mechanism is foolproof. But it puts forth a, sort of a mega kavach insulation security, which otherwise was not possible 20, 30 years ago. Trust me, today a theft in a house is very, very difficult. Thefts have actually gone down simply because people have CCTV cameras, plugged to their cloud. A thief who comes a couple of times gets captured there, and we know very well he was looking at this side, right? As simple as that. And if you do a little bit of analytics, you know what kind of only obvious what kind of a medical condition a person has, what kind of a war one can wage with a person. This is called the German tank problem. If you take a look, Germans used some sort of machine learning to understand long back during World War II to understand how many opponents are there on the other side. I mean, in fact, the opponents measured how many German tanks are there. Other way around, not Germans, okay? And they tried sending people and then count the tanks. They could not count. Some statisticians sat around and then estimated, and the estimation was very accurate. Just Google for this. It's called the German tank problem. So these estimations back then, pen and paper, back of the envelope estimation was so strong. Today, state-of-the-art computer science, hardware, software, and data can create wonders. Very unfortunately, we have all sealed data, which comes from the West. Little do we know about how to make sense out of our own data in our own locality, right? We did this small experiment at IISc back then in 2010 or 2009, if I remember. We plugged in a camera and we manually observed what kind of person wastes what kind of food and how much. This was manually observed. Kept a camera simply near the sea. We were supposed to go and put our plates. Before putting the plates, we must throw the leftover food in a big bin. Okay, there was a camera. It would capture the person's face, the person's sort of a physical structure, the gender, etc., etc. We observed that most of the times they waste because when they go to the mess, the place where they collect food, if you put a camera there, they're very hungry. They overestimate or underestimate their hunger. Okay, if they put less, they will go there and then put once more. They're lazy enough to go there once more. They put more than what they can eat. Okay, so we thought we should come out with bowl concept. We keep rice in bowls. You can come and take it any number of times, but once you can only take 2 bowls. You cannot take more than 2. To take more than 2, you should walk some 10 meters away and then come back and then take 2 more bowls. Your hand should be empty to carry 2 bowls. This worked wonders. Simple observation, eye observation told us that this is how food is wasted, and food saved is many people not going malnutritious. Right? I mean, they will be saved out of malnutrition like problem which is happening in Somalia. World will be a better place if we have many data scientists in India. I really wonder why in India we are going very slow with this. Although the government, people like Guvi, they have dreams in their eyes, but I think the slowing down is probably because of the academic structuring or the BTech courses that we craft or any kind of teaching that we do there. Let's say I'm a 50-year-old person. I do not know the subject. I try to read it up and tell you something and give you some question and give you some marks. It ends there. We do not see beyond that. Data science seems to be, if you can predict by the entry of a person what camera, what television he can buy, you probably can predict when a person is going to become a dacoit or a burglar too, right? A simple learning algorithm can solve a court case, which actually is today algorithmic. They're trying to do that too. But to bring that to India, trust me, we should buy hardware resources from outside. That's at least reasonable. We cannot manufacture everything here. Software, we export there and they package it and then give it back. That's also fine. We understand. Let us do it. But data scientific solution for these things, I don't think see, state-of-the-art data science analytics will take at least 10 years to realize whatever I'm saying. But that can be preponed if there are a lot of data science literate people in India. And today, 800 engineering colleges have started data science BE in data science. More than 1,000 colleges have started MTech in data science. But in my personal opinion, my little survey says 80% of the faculty who teach there may not really know the subject. They confess it. See, I'm not saying they're bad. They're very good faculty, but they don't have the right exposure, right? We at IIT Roper and here people like Bala in GUI, we're trying to see if we can partner and try to really give something to the society by teaching the teachers. 80% of them do not know the subject, and only 1 on 12 student is inspired about this subject when he is being taught this subject in the universities. 11 on 12 of them don't actually get it. Okay, in some of the elite institutes, of course, there are very, very good faculty, fresh, young, or senior people who have worked in this subject. They know in and out of it. They know what is coming next. They know state of the art. They can teach, but more than 90%, more than 80% of the faculty cannot. And 1 in 12 student is inspired because he goes to online courses and then somehow he manages. 11 on 12 students, they don't learn, and that's not it. They get demotivated. And that's what bothers me deep within my heart, that students get demotivated. There's a difference between knowing, not knowing, and getting demotivated. I was demotivated with thermodynamics in my college days. I will never revisit the subject. It was a terror for me, right? See, the inculcation of this idea of terror into the mind of a student has everlasting impact. A 39-year-old fellow is today saying, I will not touch thermodynamics. I'm a professor. I read, go and teach students, but this subject I don't want, the way it was taught. So I would say it is practice. I'm not blaming any university structure or faculty. That very structure takes a, no, I'm not talking about India, by the way. I'm talking about the entire world coming out with a course that is helpful for the students for tomorrow, and preponing this data scientific revolution is practically impossible unless some very like-minded good Samaritans come forward and try to teach it selflessly. And I would say some of us should do it at the teachers level, and you people as students should also contribute to this ecosystem. If you all learn really well, do some peer instruction, teach each other, I would say you are contributing to world to be a better place. The question of global warming, the question of possibility of nuclear war, every single thing can be data analytically understood, predicted. At least we have a better idea of what is what. So with this, let me stop my little talk. In fact, I wanted to show you a couple more examples, but I think it will be too much for you people today. So we can stop here. By stopping here, I mean, we will go ahead with the Q&A session. Okay. If you don't have questions, I have a lot of questions that I keep getting. I'll enumerate them and then give you the answers. Right. So on to Lahari, maybe you can tell us.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Sudarshan.